Hello there. Now the point of this, which is going to be a series of videos, is an attempt to make a timeline of the Legend of Zelda games that have been produced by Nintendo over the years. Now a quick search online is going to show you that this attempt has been taken up by many others over the years, so why add one more to the mix? Well, because I'm freaking bored, that's why. And because this series has a tendency of grabbing hold of anyone that comes into contact with it, and I'm no exception to this. Before getting into the actual construction of a timeline, I feel the need to set some ground rules for this attempt. Rule number 1. Only games created by Nintendo are going to be considered canon for this. That means the cartoon that was created in the late 80s, as well as a series of flashlight games produced by Philips Media several years later, are not going to be put on the timeline. The reason behind this is twofold. 1. Nintendo had very little to no input on these works. And as they're going to be the ones who have access to any official timeline, if it really does indeed exist, it's obvious these works would not have factored into it. Also, they sucked. Really bad. Rule number 2. Gameplay mechanics will not be used as a way to determine the timeline of a game. A good example of this reason is the beam attack. Now, this attack is used in several games, where the hero reaches a high health, and it causes a beam to shoot from the sword when attacking. However, there's at least one game, Ocarina of Time, where the developers wanted at one point to include this attack, but for various reasons declined against it. This shows the perils of using a gameplay mechanic to put a game spot on the timeline. You wouldn't want to move it for this reason within this example, because the developers did want to put it in, but for gameplay reasons couldn't. It's also important to note that I'm also including the layout of the overworld map to be included with this. Individual locations, however, may still be used. Basically what this means is that the location of the Lost Woods in two different games relative to each other wouldn't be used to place them in a timeline, but the fact that the Lost Woods was there to begin with could be. If you can wrap your head around that, great. If not, don't worry about it. Rule number 3. Instruction manuals will be used only as a last resort. Instruction manuals, especially here in the United States from Japanese games, have a tendency to be inaccurate, at least on story elements, and not be produced by the people who made the game. If an instruction manual must be used, every attempt is to be made to verify the English version of it against the Japanese one. Now this timeline is going to use a color-coded system to keep track of the certainty that I have for the placement of the games in the line. Green is going to be the starting point, and that is the game that is chosen to be the linchpin of the timeline, with all other games being placed either before or after it. For reasons that will become apparent in the next video, I've chosen for Ocarina of Time to take this spot. Other games will be coded on a scale. First is black. These games are rock solid in their placement, and really can't be placed anywhere else in the timeline. Next is going to be red. Red games will have an amount of evidence in the game to back up its placement, and little to no contradictory evidence that could place it somewhere else. But at the same time, it could be placed somewhere else if it had to be, without breaking the timeline, but makes much more sense in its current location. Yellow indicates a fair amount of doubt. While the game works in its current location, there are problems, or it could be moved into a few other locations without breaking the rest of the timeline. Last is going to be white. These are basically the who the hell knows. Games that give little evidence of where they go, and don't really break the timeline no matter where you place them. Now that we've had the baseline laid down, it's time to get to work in the next few videos.